Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Birch City News. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. Canada Post says Canadians should expect domestic package delays into the new year. Plus, 1 week into the GST tax break results in an uptick of sales for restaurants and retailers. And we tell you who's on the Canadian Taxpayer Federation's naughty list for taxpayer spending.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks so much for joining us. Canada Post says Canadians should expect domestic package delays into the new year. It's already processed its backlog of parcels from the month-long strike by thousands of workers and expects a significant portion of them to be delivered before Christmas this week. The Postal Service even delivered packages over the weekend in select cities in an effort to get more items at doors in time for the holidays. And today it's starting to accept new international mail. Well, it seems retailers and restaurants are seeing a boost in sales as the 2-month GST and HST tax break is driving Canadians to spend a little more this holiday season.
It's been about a week since the tax break started, the GST and HST tax break, which applies to a lot of items, restaurant meals, kids' toys, that kind of thing. And both restaurant owners and retailers say they're seeing what feels like an uptick in consumer spending, some more interest in maybe higher priced items, and just generally a feeling that people are going out and treating themselves a little more often. Guests are coming in and saying, well, we just finished our Christmas shopping. We feel like we have a little bit more to spend because of the tax break. And so we're here, having a restaurant meal to treat ourselves that we might not otherwise have had.
The Canadian Taxpayer Federation has released their naughty and nice list for most taxpayer spending over the past year. And topping their list is the CBC's top executive, Catherine Tate, for dishing out large executive bonuses.
Santa doesn't like it when boys and girls are greedy, and forcing struggling taxpayers to pay for Santa-sized executive bonuses is as greedy as it gets. The CBC is dishing out $18 million in taxpayer-funded bonuses this year. But Santa thinks that Tate deserves a big lump of coal, not a big taxpayer-funded bonus. Also on the taxpayer naughty list is Prime Minister Justin Trudeau for prioritizing carbon taxes over grocery bills. The patron saint of children doesn't like it when a rich ruler like Trudeau thinks paying his carbon tax is more important than parents affording food for their children. Also on the naughty list is Global Affairs Canada for racking up a monthly taxpayer booze bill of $51,000, right? So they bill taxpayers for their booze for about $51,000 a month. And Santa likes eggnog as much as the next guy, but even he knows that Global Affairs Canada is sipping on a little too much Christmas spirit.
Also, a late add to that naughty list, according to Terrazano, is Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew for hiking the province's fuel tax to 12.5 cents per litre beginning New Year's Day. On the flip side, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith made the CTF's nice list for taking the carbon tax to court. Also on that nice list, Newfoundland Labrador Premier Andrew Furey and Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe. You can see that full naughty and nice list on the CTF's website. In Ottawa, 12 cabinet ministers will have the Christmas break to learn their new roles by the new year. The 8 were sworn into cabinet on Friday following a hasty cabinet shuffle last week, in part due to the abrupt departure of former Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland and the announcement that Canada's Housing Minister Sean Fraser will not be seeking re-election, making him the 9th minister this year to declare they will be stepping away from their cabinet duties. There are now 8 new ministers in cabinet, while 4 others will have different roles. Newly appointed Official Languages Minister Rachel Ben-Dayan said politics is about difficult choices and that Trudeau has a choice to make about his future, while Housing Minister Nathaniel Erskine-Smith said he hopes to effect change with whatever time the government has left before an election.
Politics is about choices. Very often those are difficult choices. I think the Prime Minister was quite clear that he has a choice that he's reflecting on. I think each one of us, and certainly I'll speak for myself, I made a choice today, and the decision that I made is based on the intention that I always had, and that was to enter politics, not worrying about the next election or the partisan nature of this job, but in order to serve Canadians.
I understand there's going to be a short runway. I'm not blind to that. But if I can make a small difference, if I can make a big difference, I want to make the biggest difference that I can. That's why I joined politics in the first place.
Canada's immigration policy has seen a significant shift in the last year, with a cap on international students, reduction of permanent workers, and a pause on most private asylum sponsorships. Immigration Minister Mark Miller says the situation became overheated and the system needed an infusion of discipline.
We still need immigrants, we still need immigration, but we do have to be able to say to Canadians that we've been listening to them and react accordingly when we see that things get overheated. So I think that is sort of the shifting of a very large ship that we've been affecting over the last year.
2 registered sex offenders in Alberta have been charged in 2 separate incidents. Alert's Internet Child Exploitation Unit arrested Clifford Roseland of Kinsella, Alberta. He was charged with possession, distribution, and accessing child pornography. Investigators were notified after child sexual abuse material was shared online. Roseland was first convicted of sexual interference in 2012. He has been released from custody. His next appearance in court is scheduled for January 13th. Meanwhile, in a separate investigation, a 35-year-old sex offender was charged with possession, making and transmitting child pornography, and breach of offenses. In this instance, the suspect allegedly shared child sexual exploitation images of a family member. Naming that suspect and even naming the small rural community where he lived could potentially identify the victim in this case. That suspect was previously charged in 2014. He remains in custody. His next court appearance is January 7th. Well, Lethbridge Polytechnic for the first time cracked the top 10 list in the nation's top research college rankings. The 2024 Research Info Source ranking of the top 50 research colleges in Canada, with Lethbridge Polytechnic snatching 10th place. The Associate Vice President of Applied Research says that the Polytechnic should be recognized for its efforts to evolve around any growing industry.
Oh, it's quite an achievement. I just remarked to everyone here of just how special that is. I think when the people who've been here for a long time took it as well, this looks like a normal sort of development. We've been rising up through those rankings over the last several years. But when you look at it in the context of Canada, let alone Alberta, but within Canada, and to be top 10 within a country that has so many large polytechnics and colleges doing really amazing work, that's quite special. We always say we go where industry is going, so we're very responsive. We don't try to pre-plan too much. Obviously, we have some strengths in agriculture. We are in southern Alberta, but we're equally proud of what we do in public safety, applied research, our spatial technologies applied research, and some of those other industries. If industry comes along with a problem, we're always happy to listen to it. And so who knows where we go next, but it will be where industry is.
Other notable research centers in Alberta on the list include NAIT and SAIT, taking 3rd and 4th place respectively, Olds College at 14th, and Red Deer Polytechnic at 43rd place. Niagara College took the top spot on the list in all of Canada, so congratulations to them. One notable program that Lethbridge Polytechnic is renowned for is their police cadet training program. Last Friday, a graduation ceremony was held for a class of cadets that are dedicated to serve in multiple services in our region, where they received their badges and diplomas. BCN's Landon Hickok shares more on this story.
18 cadets were honored last Friday as Lethbridge Polytechnic celebrated the graduates from their police cadet training program. The program works in conjunction with various police agencies in southern Alberta to provide an opportunity to earn post-secondary credits while training towards their criminal justice policing diploma.
You know, we are so proud of this program and these cadets that graduated today. They worked extremely hard. We do have a program that's unlike any other across the country. It is the only one in our province that grants a post-secondary credential through police cadet training. So it's very, very significant for these recruits. We work with Lethbridge Police Service and Taber Police Service and Blood Tribe Police Service in our area to deliver this program. They in turn welcome other services that would like to come and join their training. So we have an agreement with CN Police and with CPKC so that they are able to come and train their recruits with our services as well.
This class consists of 13 cadets with the Lethbridge Police Service, 3 with the Blood Tribe Police, and 2 with the Canadian National Railway Police Service. The head chief of Lethbridge Police says that with the growing reputation of the service from the community, bringing in young new talent is important to reinforce those positive interactions and commitments.
There's a lot of support by the community for our officers, and anytime you inject new blood into anything, any organization, even your own body, it's a good thing. So these officers are young, they're eager, they just want to serve their community, and they've got the proper training, not just on the physical and techniques or whatever. A lot of our training also goes about humility, service, and what they can do for the community. So we are really looking forward to their contribution moving into the future, and very confident they're going to serve our community well and make us safer every day.
The Polytechnic is also currently training recruits for the new Grand Prairie Police Service, the province's newest force in over 60 years. The cadet training program on average lasts for 22 to 24 weeks. For Bridge City News, I'm Landon Hickok.
Well, this is the time of year when many get together with friends and family for meals, but the sad reality is some don't have a place to go or a special Christmas dinner to eat. Well, thanks to charitable organizations like Lethbridge Soup Kitchen, those in need can still enjoy special dinners at Christmas time. Our VCN's Heidi Echeverria visited the soup kitchen to find out what's planned during the holidays.
At Christmas time, Lethbridge Soup Kitchen continues its noble and unstoppable task of blessing by feeding those who need a hot meal. Turkey, mashed potatoes, corn, and stuffing, along with ice cream, apple, and pumpkin pies for dessert, will be the special Christmas meal. Ellis Binedal, manager at the organization, says what are the special meals and gifts that will be given during and after Christmas.
We have a special bacon and eggs breakfast, and then Wednesday evening we'll do a ham dinner. On Wednesday at lunch, the LSCO is providing us with also a turkey dinner, so there'll be lots of turkey to go around this year. Oh, everybody's always busy making stockings and stuffed socks and special presents at Christmas, so they will get a Christmas gift with some toiletries and socks and some snacks on Christmas morning. I think we really want to make sure they feel loved and cared for, especially at times like this.
The work of volunteers and donors is essential in this task. Such is the case of Teresa Baldry, who, along with 15 members of her family, decided to go and serve, helping to prepare food at the Lethbridge Soup Kitchen, so that Christmas Eve would be special, even for homeless people.
We brought our grandchildren and want them to teach them how important it is to give back to our community and to be a good community member. It's so important for them to understand how fortunate we all are to have somewhere to live, food to eat, and clothes to wear. So we just really want them to understand how important this is to serve and to help people who are less fortunate than we are.
Among the volunteers, there is also Henry, who got up early at 7 o'clock in the morning to prepare himself and be ready to serve the community since his first volunteer work.
I'm just serving, making food for people who are less fortunate than me, just to be a good citizen, try to do my part. And you can just see how thankful they are for you doing this. I'd encourage you guys to come out and help.
While many rest on these holidays, Lethbridge Soup Kitchen will continue to serve even on December the 25th and January the 3rd. For Bridge City News, I'm Heidi Echevarria.
And although the holidays can be full of hustle and bustle, it's good to remember to take some downtime too. The city of Lethbridge has some family activities to keep the kids engaged and entertained over the break. First, check out the great display of lights they've set up at Brewery Gardens while also enjoying those amazing views of the river valley. And while you're in the area, the Nature Center is extending its hours to accommodate families looking to fill holiday schedule gaps. Join the staff daily between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. from December 27th through January 4th. Also, if you don't have plans for New Year's Eve, the Agri-Food and Trade Center will ring in 2025 with classic rock trilogy with Sweet 33 and Lethbridge's own the Chevelles. Sounds like a great time, New Year's Eve there. Well, recapping one of our top stories today, Canada Post says Canadians should expect domestic package delays into the new year. It's already processed its backlog of parcels from the month-long strike by thousands of workers and expects a significant portion of them to be delivered before Christmas time this week already. The Postal Service even delivered packages over the weekend in select cities in an effort to get more items at doors in time for the holidays. And today it's starting to accept new international mail. And hey, if you see news happening in your community, be sure and send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also visit our website anytime to check out a number of our stories and interviews. BCN will be taking a break over the holidays, but we will be back with our regular programming on Thursday, January 2nd. Until then, you can still tune in daily, though, for some of our informative interviews on faith, family, health, and wellness. Also, BCN weekend specials will continue to air through the new year, so I will see you there. From all of us here at Bridge City News and Miracle Channel, we wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Well, the world has always been a challenge to navigate, but perhaps it's the most challenging it's ever been today, especially for young people. So where can teens go to find a safe place, maybe some advice, acceptance, and encouragement these days? Well, joining us from Lethbridge to shed some light on this is Jordan Schellenberg. He is the CEO of Youth One, located on 13th Street North in Lethbridge. Jordan, great to have you with us today. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's start out. Let's maybe tell us what Youth One is all about and how it got started.
Yeah, great question. So we've been around for almost 10 years now, locally founded right out of Lethbridge. And so almost 10 years ago, we really found that in many communities, there's a lack of youth-focused spaces where teens could come that was safe, that was inclusive, that really gave them opportunities that they maybe wouldn't have before. And in Lethbridge, it's not really a stat to be proud of, but we have one of the highest child poverty rates in Alberta. Latest research that came out is in Canada, almost 1 in every 2 young people grow up without a mentor or positive role model in their lives. And then you add the increase in mental health issues stemming from trauma-related incidents. And we just really thought there was an opportunity there. And so that's why Youth One provides prevention-based out-of-school programs, meals, and support services for teens and families in our neighborhoods, and that's with no financial barrier.
Yeah, those stats are a little bit alarming. So was this kind of started more to be like an after-school program type of a thing?
For sure. Yeah. Originally, we started just for high school students between the hours of 3 and 6 p.m., which is typically a high crime rate. For young people, that would be a national stat. It's just unsupervised time and lack of spaces for youth to attend if they're not a part of any clubs or sports teams. And so that's really where it started. And then from there, based on feedback from families and youth, we grew and started offering more opportunities. So,
What's your background, Jordan? Did you kind of grow up like this? Were you a latchkey kid, or were you, kind of like a youth pastor? What motivated you personally to get involved in this?
Yeah, so I mean, growing up as a kid, I was a pastor's kid.
Okay.
My dad was a pastor, but as I got older, we actually grew up across the street from where Youth One was at the time. That seems like a long, long time ago. But my background, once I got older, was actually I had gone to school for policing. And in that education that I received, I really was drawn to prevention-based programs. Is rather than entering into a young person's life when they've broken the law or got in trouble in that form, I wanted to be the one helping with programs that would prevent that from happening and really kind of walk alongside youth. And so that's where my background was, and it led to us discovering this need and starting Youth One.
Oh, that's amazing. And it started when, about 9 or 10 years ago?
Yeah, in 2014. So come this October will be our 10th year.
Okay, and it's grown quite a bit since it was launched, hasn't it?
It has, yeah. We always joke around how we had our first day of opening, we had one youth show up, and we thought, okay, maybe there's not a need here. But yeah, now we see about, this year we're on track to see over 700 registered youth for the school year. And we roughly see about 430 youth in attendance every week.
That's amazing. It all started with just one child.
That's right. I know. Play off the name, right?
And you have all kinds of activities going on for the kids. So what are some of the most popular for the kids to do?
Yeah, that's right. So we really enjoy playing. Like we take a lot of value in play. And then we also offer support for the youth. But many of our activities when youth come in is things that they just like to do. And so we have a skateboard ramp in our facility where we can teach skateboarding and scootering and all those kind of things. We have a climbing wall. We have different media centers, access to computers. We do crafts every day, meals. We have board games, pool tables, like the list goes on. As we always look at what are just activities youth like to do, and we'll try our best to provide them. And it just really sets us up for youth to keep on coming back and opportunities for our volunteers just to get involved in their lives and doing different activities with them. So,
And is it free for kids to join or to come and attend?
Yeah. So one big thing we always kind of put in our mission is that there's no financial barriers. So any youth that wishes to attend, as long as they're between the ages of 11 and 18, they're able to access all of our programs and services.
Okay, now that sounds great. What are, in your opinion, you work with the kids all the time, but what are some of the biggest issues that young people are dealing with today? Is it online bullying or peer pressure?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very tough world to grow up in. It's changed a lot, even from when I was growing up. Like I mentioned before, mental health issues that many times stem from trauma at younger ages, lack of resources for opportunities. I think lots of people are struggling financially right now. It can greatly affect the healthy development of a young person. And so our goal is just to come alongside youth, whatever stage of life they're at, love on them and offer what we can to help them really tap into their full God-given potential that we think they have.
Yeah. So what do you find when you're mentoring these kids? What are the biggest things that they're kind of dealing with?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of those things. A lot of mental health struggles, and it could just be from like good stress, like I've been cramming for this test and I don't know how I'm going to do, and we work with them to really like deep rooted issues where they need some assistance that's even larger than us, that we're able to connect them in the community and get them help. So it could be, I've just been kicked out of my house, I don't know what to do, and we're able to connect them. We don't offer housing, but we know people that do. And so we have those relationships already, and we're able to help guide them into those supports that they need.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that you mentioned that. I understand that sometimes you guys help youth find jobs or find housing or assist with their education. What does that look like? How do you do that?
Yeah, so one of our programs is called The Point, and they can access that throughout the day as long as they call ahead and make an appointment. But if it's anything that we can offer in-house, helping them find jobs, job-related skills, like what should I do at an interview or where, and then those other things, that means a little bit more intervention. So we're not an intervention family center, youth and family center, but like I said, we have those relationships with other organizations in the community, like Woods Homes, Lethbridge Family Services, that if there's some professional help that's needed, we're able to direct them appropriately.
Wow. And then you also have a sponsor a youth program, right? So can you maybe explain what this is?
Yeah, so it's our main fundraising program, and so all of our fundraising events raise money for this program. When we ask for funds throughout the year, our monthly supporters, it all goes towards this. It's called the Launch Forward program. Essentially, what we did was we evaluated what it actually was costing one youth to attend for a full year, and it was roughly $100 a month. So kind of like a gym membership. This includes full access to meals and snacks every day, access to professional trained staff. We have two sites now, so access to both sites and all the programs. And so what people can do is at these events, our fundraising events, or even if they want to sign up for monthly support, so we say for every $1,200, it's covering the equivalent cost of one youth to attend the full year of all these programs. And so every year, it increases because we're growing, but this year we had to fulfill 430 individual youth sponsorships for the entire school year. So that's what we're raising money right now for.
That's incredible. Now, you mentor youth. So what does that look like? Is it one-on-one? Is it a bunch of kids just hanging out with somebody? How do you do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of group mentorship. Mm-hmm. So with the amount of youth coming in, it's very difficult to always just be doing one-on-one. But as the relationship grows, those opportunities happen where, we will take a youth out for coffee, or we'll go to the movies with them, or show up to a basketball game and cheer them on. Our desire is to see those relationships grow and that they have that healthy adult in their life that really actually does legitimately care about them. And that's where we see conversations beginning to happen, discussions about life in general and where they're going and just direction in life. And so we just want to walk alongside them. And so whether they just participate as a group or they really connect with one of our volunteers and meet with them outside of our regular programs, we just want to see that relationship grow.
Yeah, I bet you must delve into those deep existential questions, right? Like, what's the purpose of life? Why am I here? That sort of thing.
Yes. Yeah, we really do. And we just move at the pace of the relationship, right? So our offering is everyone is welcome here as long as you're the appropriate age. These spaces and these programs are for you. We're here for you if you need it. And our hope is that as the relationships grow, we're able just to help them navigate life. And that can be everything from practical support, like assistance and finding a job, to really those deep discussions about, even the purpose of life.
Yeah, oh, definitely. Now you were mentioning you work with kids 11 to 18 or 19, right? So is there a particular age group that comes out more to Youth One than others? Or does it really make a difference?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the program, right? So we have a lot of middle school youth that attend here. They just really love being wild and crazy and participating in all the games that we offer. And then once they get to high school, they kind of settle down a little bit, and that's where you start having those deeper conversations. But they like to just be a little bit more social and chat with each other, and so I would say it's a mix for sure. But then we also have those high schoolers that they even start to say, "Yeah, I want to give back now," and so they start volunteering with the younger groups as well. So it's just a mix depending on the programs.
Yeah. Do you have any kids that stick with it through the 7 or 8 years that they're kind of going through those ages?
Yeah, we found that a lot of times if the young person starts in grade 6, they will attend as long as they're in the neighborhood and it's accessible to them and their life situation doesn't change, that they will attend up until they graduate. So some really cool stories that stem out of that.
Oh, I bet. What kind of feedback do you get from the kids and from the parents?
Yeah, we get so much feedback in all different areas, from people in the community to parents. The unfortunate side is a lot of times youth, once they graduate and age out, they kind of move on with their life. And so you do get really cool stories. We had last week one youth that was 25, and I had known them for about 12 years. And they came in, and I remember them, and they were a challenge for sure. But they reminded us, and they said, we wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for the services that were provided. And so when you hear about those kind of stories, you're reminded of the important work that we get to do. And so feedback like that is awesome. We get simple feedback. We do a biannual survey with the youth where we hear, hey, this program sucks. You need to change this, right? And so we're like, yeah, okay, that's cool. Like, why does it suck? And we're able to adapt and really figure out what youth and families are looking for and how we can assist them the best.
No, that's awesome. What is your adult to kid ratio look like there? How many kids you let in, for example, at one time?
Yeah, so 1 to 8. So for every 8 youth, we try to have one trained staff or volunteer on hand. We think even 1 to 8 is tough to really connect with youth, especially when in a middle school program. Everyone's just there to, play. And so we try our best to delve into those relationships a lot, but having that 1 to 8 ratio gives us the best chance to do that. Anything more than that is even better. So.
Wow, amazing. Well, thanks so much for the work that you do and for being with us today, Jordan.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me again.
Canada's often looked at as a country with free health care, but is it actually free? Don't our tax dollars actually pay for some of that, or a lot of it? Joining us today from Calgary to discuss this in more detail is Nadeem Esmail. He's a senior fellow with the Fraser Institute and nonpartisan think tank. Nadeem, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thanks for having me on the show.
You bet. Now, you recently co-authored a study on the price of public health care insurance in Canada, and you say that Canadians often misunderstand the true cost of public health care. Who's actually paying for the health care?
It comes from taxpayers. It comes out of the tax coffers. All of the money we pay in taxes and income taxes, business taxes, profit taxes. There are some healthcare taxes in some provinces, fuel taxes. It goes into one giant coffer. And out of that coffer comes our healthcare expenditures, which works out to about $225 billion in 2023. So it's Canadians who pay for it, but I think the way we pay for it makes it difficult for Canadians to understand just how much they themselves are actually paying for their annual healthcare insurance.
So what are the actual annual costs per family that are coming out of our tax dollars?
When we look at an average family of 4 in Canada, they're earning about $176,000. They're paying just about $18,000 for their healthcare insurance. That drops down to about $5,600 for an unattached individual, and then a one-parent, one-child family is going to be about $5,400. So large sums of money, substantial, again, reflective of the fact that some families will be paying more taxes than other families, but none of those dollar amounts are small, and certainly they're not free.
So have costs actually gone up after the COVID-19 pandemic? What have you seen? What do some of the numbers look like?
If we look pre and post pandemic, what we find is that the healthcare expenditures have indeed risen from before the pandemic to after. Certainly during the pandemic, we had some interesting movements upwards and downwards, but from before to after, we are certainly higher than we were. And remember, this is in the developed world's most expensive universal access healthcare system. So not only are these dollar amounts high for a family, they're high internationally.
Now, your study also shows that healthcare costs have been rising steadily since 1997. In fact, the costs have increased, 240%?
They have. That's about 1.7 times as fast as the average family's income, which means healthcare is placing an increasing burden on the family income. Now, we talk a lot about housing. Healthcare costs have risen about 1.6 times as fast as housing. So while housing costs have outstripped family incomes, healthcare expenditures have outstripped housing.
I understand that the rate of these rising healthcare costs has declined, over the last 10 years? So perhaps that might be good news. Do we know why the rate has actually slowed down somewhat?
We've seen a reduction in the rate of growth in government expenditures on healthcare over the last decade, which has brought healthcare expenditures just slightly above the growth in family income. So we're still seeing a fairly consistent share of family income going to healthcare expenditures. But remember also now in 2023, we have the longest wait times ever recorded in Canada. So the healthcare system certainly hasn't improved, and we already have a lot of money in the system. So as much as we've seen some slowing of expenditure growth, that growth in expenditures is still keeping up with income growth, which means we're not making any headway for the average family, and it's not a great healthcare system in exchange for it.
Now let's talk about healthcare costs and where a lot of the money is being allocated. Is it towards maybe helping those who are battling cancer and some other serious diseases?
Certainly, and that's going to be a fairly typical allocation. Healthcare expenditures will be driven towards those services that are going to be saving life and less towards those services where we're improving life or where we are treating individuals for conditions proactively because of the shortages we have in the healthcare system. And we see it in waiting lists too. The wait time for cancer is down at 3 or 4 weeks. It's still far longer than it should be. It's longer than physicians consider reasonable. But that's nothing compared to the year-long waits we can see in orthopedic surgery and neurosurgery and medically necessary plastic surgeries. So the wait times, again, will reflect that same distribution. When we look at the data internationally, what we find is the Canadian healthcare system is not too bad at dragging people back from the brink of death. The problem is it treats them terribly, if not inhumanely, in the process of doing so, with these remarkable delays for access.
So then how does Canada really compare to other developed nations for the amount per capita that we actually spend on healthcare?
When we look at per capita expenditures adjusted for purchasing power parity, Canada ranks about seventh on an age-adjusted basis internationally among peer nations that also have universal access healthcare systems. When we take those expenditures as a share of income, of share of GDP, Canada ranks first. So whichever way you cut it, Canada is among the top spenders on universal access healthcare in the developed world.
So let's compare maybe ourselves to the United States or some of the other, maybe some of the European nations such as Germany, France, and England. Do we have more physicians than a lot of those nations, shorter wait times, more hospitals, or even more diagnostic machines and clinics? How do we really compare?
We are bottom ranking when it comes to those comparisons. Let's take the US off the table. That's a non-universal healthcare system by design, and that's not what Canadians want. So let's compare Canada to other universal access nations in Western Europe, in Australia, Japan. When we look at that peer group, that's 30 nations in total, we find Canada ranks in the high 20s in terms of physicians per thousand population, hospital beds, MRI machines, CT scanners. That is some of the lowest ranking access in the developed world for a healthcare system that ranks at the very top of the health expenditure charts. When we get wait times, it turns out Canada has some of the longest waiting lists for access to medically necessary physician and hospital care in the developed world. On average in Canada now, well over 6 months for the average Canadian. Again, in the developed world's most expensive universal access healthcare system.
So you focused a bit on wait times. Do you think maybe Canadians are getting a little frustrated and are going south of the border to get their MRIs or maybe some treatments?
Certainly, we're seeing increasing frustration, I think, among the Canadian public. It's showing up in polling data, it's showing up in conversations, it's showing up at the political level as politicians are being more responsive to the issue and more reactive to the issue. There are some phenomenal private alternatives that are growing and expanding south of the border, as well as in Western Europe, through the Caribbean, through Southeast Asia. That market has been growing for many years. And we're seeing some private operators create some interesting opportunities here in Canada as well. We're seeing some in British Columbia, some in Alberta, some in Quebec. But governments, again, across Canada, and we just heard from the CMA, the Canadian Medical Association, on the subject as well, they really want to commit to this failing model and trap Canadians within it. Which is going to mean Canadians will have to leave their jurisdiction for the healthcare they need because the public system is clearly unable to deliver it in a timely fashion.
You know, through your research and study as well, what do you think it is needed to really attract more physicians and more nurses to come to Canada and practice here?
I think certainly attracting more professionals is part of the answer. Training more professionals in Canada is also part of the answer. We know medical school training in Canada was pared back in the early 1990s and has been increasing recently. But how many Canadian students who are capable, highly trained, qualified with excellent grades and backgrounds are going to Europe to be trained as physicians, going to the Caribbean? There are schools there that are advertising in Canada, come and become a doctor here, and then you can practice not in Canada because re-entry into Canada, you're an international medical graduate again. We need to be training Canadians here at home as well as being an attractive destination for medical professionals. And at the same time, I think we need to make better use of the medical professionals we have. Let's not forget we have physicians in Canada who are seeking more operating time or who could do more operating time but can't access it in the public system. And we have unemployed, fully trained Canadian surgeons ready to practice in Canada who can't find a surgical appointment in this country because there is no operating time for them.
Or how about some physicians who are actually driving cab in certain cities because they can't get a position here in Canada as a doctor?
Indeed, in that protective system that keeps many out, there are standards that need to be maintained, I think, for the healthcare system as a whole, but certainly the pathways in seem to be unnecessarily restrictive for physicians who were doing the same work in another country but are unable to treat patients here. It may be as straightforward as saying if you can have a European or American certification, we'll recognize that in Canada. That certainly that mutual recognition would certainly be one path to speeding up the process to get more physicians into service here in this country.
We seem to be seeing a lot of European nations using a model that incorporates a mixture of both public and private healthcare, and the results seem to be somewhat better than we're seeing here in Canada.
Certainly, and we've heard the Premier talk about this. Alberta is walking down some reform pathways. I think it's cautious and tentative at this point. But if we look around the developed world at all of those other developed nations that have universal access healthcare systems, we find the top performing ones all have private competitive providers delivering universally accessible hospital and surgical services with activity-based funding, pay for the care they actually provide, not for existence the way we do here in Alberta. They have private parallel health insurance sectors for patients to seek care on their own terms with their own resources when they wish to do so. And they all have cost sharing or user fees for access to the system, a small fee when you access the doctor's office or the emergency room to encourage a more informed decision making on the part of patients about when and where it's best to access the healthcare system. But generally speaking, if we look at the path of health reform around the developed world, developed nations with universal access healthcare systems have been moving further and further away from the Canadian model and finding better value for money and better access for patients. It's well time we took that lesson as well.
So where do you see healthcare in Canada heading over the next decade?
I am hopeful. I think we've seen some very interesting reforms in Quebec. Certainly, Quebec is moving down the activity-based funding path very aggressively now. They have a larger private sector than the other provinces. And Quebec has always been a bit curious in having shorter wait times than other provinces for slightly lower expenditures. So I think we're seeing a bit more of that come to fruition. We've had a lot of talk about healthcare reform in Alberta. I think there's some positive ideas being tossed around. I don't think the legislation is quite there yet. But certainly if those ideas come to fruition, if we see the Premier move us towards activity-based funding, a larger role for the private sector, which we may even be seeing now at the fringes here in Airdrie, I think we're going to see some promising things. But I'm hopeful, but I don't know that I'm optimistic because we still have the Canadian Medical Association coming out and saying, no, the Canadian policy construct has failed Canadian patients. It stuck taxpayers with a world-class bill for very poor access to services. We need to double down and recommit to this model, which is a bizarre position to take, but certainly the position they seem to have taken.
So how do you put the fears at rest of somebody who says, I don't believe in a two-tiered healthcare system? I want to make sure that it's just the public system, everybody's treated equally, everybody gets the same care. But then on the other hand, with private care, you take some out of the queue, so the waiting lists are not as long. So how do you try and convince me, who says, you know what, I don't believe in a two-tiered healthcare system, that this is the way to go, private and public?
I think the reality is when we fall ill or injured, the two-tier and the private-public distinctions no longer matter. All that matters is quality care in a time frame that provides comfort, peace of mind, and successful recovery. So let's not ask the question, what do we want philosophically? Let's ask the question, how do we deliver that to patients who are ill, who are injured, who need health care? Let's look at Australia. This is a healthcare system that has private providers competing to deliver publicly funded, universally accessible services. They have a vibrant private health insurance sector that actually is tax subsidized to encourage high-income earners to go into the private system so that the public system can focus on complex patients and lower-income patients. They have cost sharing. But what's the outcome? They spend less than Canada does. They have shorter waiting lists than we do, and they have some of the best outcomes from the healthcare process in the developed world. That same lesson can be told in Switzerland, in Japan, in the Netherlands, where they've reduced wait times meaningfully as they moved further along with the private sector. The lesson is clear. This is not about abandoning some philosophical position. This is about better universal access to healthcare for every Canadian.
Nadim Ismail is a senior fellow with the Fraser Institute. Thanks so much for joining us today from Calgary.
Thanks for having me on the show.
If someone brought up the term Tourette syndrome, what kinds of things would come to mind? Most of us probably don't really know a lot about it, but today we are going to learn a bit more about this disorder. And Jerry Firth joins us from Lethbridge. He is the coordinator of the annual Trek for Tourette fundraiser, which just occurred a couple weeks ago in Lethbridge. So he's here in Lethbridge. Welcome to Bridge City News, Jerry. Great to have you on. And I understand that fundraiser took place at Legacy Park and it was quite successful.
Yes, thank you. Pleasure to be here, and thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit more about Tourette syndrome.
Of course. Okay, so maybe let's find out, first of all, what your connection is with Tourette's syndrome. Is this something that you yourself have been diagnosed with, or perhaps someone close to you?
Yeah, our oldest child, who's now the age of, well, almost 17 now, was diagnosed with Tourette syndrome at the age of 6. Myself and our youngest child also have tics, which is the most common trait within Tourette syndrome, but it's a part of a host of what would be known as tic disorder. Neither of us have been formally diagnosed, at least not at this point. We also have other individuals in our life that we know that live with and are affected by Tourette syndrome.
Okay, so what kind of a disease is this, and what are the symptoms? You did mention the tics there.
Yeah, so Tourette syndrome is a neurological disorder, which means it affects the brain and other nerves within the body. So this disorder involves repetitive and involuntary movements and sounds known as tics. It's part of a group of tic disorders and is the most severe of these types of disorders.
Okay, so can you maybe describe what some of these various types of tics, what these symptoms sort of look like?
Certainly. So tics present differently for everyone. It can range on a scale of severity from minor to rather large and uncontrollable. Movements can be present in any part of the body. That would include the face, neck, arms, legs, and so on. It could include things like flinching, twisting, flinging, among other movements. The vocalizations could include things like humming, grunting, coughing, and vocalizing certain words or phrases. For example, with our child, humming is something that's quite present for them. And they also have various words or phrases that they might repeat. Um, they have an arm flinch that they do when they flick out their arm to the side. But of course, throughout um, the development of Tourette syndrome that they've been living with, their tics have changed and morphed. For myself, for example, I also have most of my tics happen in my face. I also have a bit of a shoulder roll or a shoulder shuffle. You might actually end up seeing that at various times within this interview. Um, and then when I'm often preoccupied with watching TV or something, I'll do a ticking noise with my mouth. And so, like I said, it's different for everyone and can look and sound different. And those tics can change throughout the lifetime.
Yeah, you mentioned the change there. Is this something that can gradually increase over time, or does it more decrease? Does it affect younger people more than older people? Do you grow out of it ever?
Yeah, good question. So it typically does change, and the more it's more common with children. People enter that adulthood can live with Tourette syndrome, but often it does decrease, and in many cases it can actually even go away in time. That's not true for everyone, but I would say that it's more severe among young people.
Okay, all right. Now, we often see Tourette syndrome depicted in the movies as people who maybe like swear uncontrollably. That's kind of what it's known for. But how much reality is there to that?
Certainly, yeah. So movies and other popular media often depict Tourette syndrome on the higher end of severity. The uncontrollable swearing is often known as what's called, see if I get the term right, coprolalia. In reality, only about 10% of people impacted by Tourette syndrome display vocal tics that would consist of things such as the socially inappropriate cussing or swearing. This depiction, unfortunately, can be incredibly harmful and continues to provide the misconceptions of what Tourette syndrome is.
Yeah, no, for sure, definitely. Now, are people with Tourette's are completely aware of the tics that are occurring, or do they try to stop them from happening?
Yeah, I would say for the most part, there is some awareness. I would say specifically amongst the more severe tics, they're pretty hard to be missed by anyone, including the individual. There are times, though, where it becomes a bit of a normal function and you may not acknowledge or recognize them, and others who are familiar with you also may not acknowledge them. And as I had mentioned earlier, that some of them can look like normal actions or behaviors by an individual, so they might go unnoticed by others and themselves. Unfortunately, though, some of the more severe tics can be quite uncomfortable and painful even at times. For example, our child has one where they thump their chest pretty hard, and that can be quite hurtful for them. So those types of tics obviously are ones that they're quite aware of. But like I said, they are uncontrollable and involuntary. So there are times that you can work to try to suppress them, but that can be very difficult for most.
How common is this disease, and does it impact one gender more than the other?
Sure. So tic disorders, so Tourette syndrome is a part of a group of tic disorders, and tic disorders affect about 1 in 100 children, and Tourette syndrome is more around 1 in 160. It tends to affect males more than females. I think it's a 3-in-1 ratio to a 4-in-1 ratio, somewhere around there. Um, uh, and it shows up and presents differently amongst males and females in some ways as well.
Interesting. Like in what way?
Just with regard to well, when it presents itself, males typically end up presenting a little bit earlier in life than females, and there are more prevalence with some of the motor tics.
I understand. Okay. What age group does it typically affect? I know you've mentioned you've got young kids even that have it. Does it usually start pretty young?
Yeah, so the first signs of Tourette syndrome usually occur between the ages of about 5 and 10. Now, they can occur as early as the age of 12 or even later, up to the age of 18 is when you might still first start seeing tics occur. They usually start out pretty mild in nature, often with the head, neck, or face, and then later present throughout other parts of the body, and the severity can increase over time as well. But yes, usually in younger ages is when it starts, and and as I mentioned, you can eventually start to grow out of them, and most people do, whereas they might live with it for their life.
Wow. Do you know how many people have been diagnosed with this in southern Alberta or in the Lethbridge area?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think there's any stats available for this particularly, at least nothing that I could find that was accessible. But if we can imagine 1 in about 160 children being affected, I'm not sure exactly where we are with the population of children, but at 100,000 plus people in Lethbridge, I would say there's probably 200-300 individuals that are likely affected or living with TS.
Wow, incredible. So what do we know about the cause of Tourette syndrome? Is it genetic, or can the environment around us sort of contribute to it?
Certainly. Yes. So the exact cause itself is unknown. They continue to do research around this area and have not yet found any direct correlation. There are both genetic and environmental effects that then can play a role with Tourette syndrome. We do know that it is pretty common within families, so genetics do play a role, and it can be intergenerational. Now, with it, because there's no real understanding of the cause, there's also currently no cure for Tourette syndrome. However, there are certain treatments that can include things like medication, relaxation techniques, and psychotherapy.
Okay, well, that at least brings some sort of relief, hopefully. Is Tourette syndrome in any way associated with ADHD or OCD?
Yeah, so it's actually, well, the term would be that's often used as comorbidity, but certainly Tourette syndrome is often accompanied by any of those other neurological disorders, whether it be attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, oppositional defiance disorder or OCD itself. And so each of those might create new dynamics or have different effects or impacts on how TS might be present, and then also create some other complexities and complications as a result.
Wow. Obviously, it has impact on the individual themselves, but what about what type of impact would it have on the family unit?
Yeah, certainly. So again, I think it would often depend on the individuals who are affected by Tourette syndrome and how the other neurological disorders that they might experience would impact their lives. This could have an effect on behavioral attributes, academics, social behaviors, etc. So it would very much depend on many factors in that way. Um, but I think that a lot of the challenges that come with it is because it's such a misunderstood diagnosis that there's also often a lot of social stigma. Plus, there's also minimal resources available to individuals and families affected. With that social stigma that exists as well, it can also feel like often an isolated experience for the individual and families. And so, again, it would range, but I can speak from our family experience. It's been an incredible journey of many highs and lows, and some often very difficult conversations and some difficult interactions and engagements, both with our child and ourselves, but also with the professionals and other resources that we try to interact and engage with, often trying to explore pathways for the success of our child.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I'm sure it hasn't been an easy road for sure, but hopefully it's brought you together a little bit closer as a family.
In many ways, it has, especially around us taking on a lead in coordinating the Trek for Tourette. It's something that when we first started as a family, shortly after our child was diagnosed, it gave us a sense of community where we weren't the only ones that were living with a child affected by TS, and also help us to better just explore and have conversations about what does it mean to live with TS, and have conversations with others in our lives as well, our family and friends, about what that might look like.
Right. It looks like we're out of time, but thanks so much, Jerry, for being with us for this very informative discussion on Tourette's syndrome, and all the best to you and your family, of course.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It was wonderful to be here, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, of course. Jerry Firth is the coordinator of the annual Trek for Tourette fundraiser for the Lethbridge Tourette Group. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks so much for watching.